Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere scorching somewhere. You can almost feel the heat shimmering in the air just from thinking about it. The ancient Iranian plateau, you're standing there now in your sandals, half wishing for a portable fan, or maybe just a portable escape route. The year? Let's just say it's somewhere deep in antiquity. The sun's beating down, the dust is relentless, and somehow, someone out here decided it was the perfect moment to invent dessert. You're sticky, sunburned, and squinting. The idea of ice cream seems like a fantasy some delicacy reserved for cold northern lands, not a place where water itself is more precious than gold. And yet, a sweet chill is coming. You just have to walk through a few centuries of ingenuity, palace politics, and frankly wild cooling hacks to get there. You probably won't survive this walk barefoot, but luckily you're not barefoot. You're just comfortably tucked into bed, letting your imagination do the heavy lifting. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Trudging through the dry edge of a desert near ancient Yazd, somewhere around 500 BCE around you, the air flickers with heat. You can smell sand, your camel bells in the distance, the faint plodding of hooves. Persia, land of empires and engineers, has a problem. How to cool off during the soul-melting summers. There are no refrigerators, no air-conditioned lounges, and certainly no iced coffee. It's just you, the sun, and a dream of anything cold. The earliest Persians didn't call it ice cream, of course. They didn't have a word for it, or a cone, or a cherry on top. What they did have, though, was genius. They had underground chambers that stayed cold year-round. They had trade routes bringing spices and sweet things, and they had the simple, decadent idea that a frozen treat was worth hauling snow for. That's right, your ancient predecessor might have eaten something cold and sweet even when it was 40 degrees Celsius in the shade. Historians still argue whether these early desserts qualify as sorbet, sherbet, or proto-slushies. But let's not get too technical yet. We're still in the phase of try not to pass out from heat stroke. And if you're wondering where, exactly you are right now. Picture a village built with earth-toned walls, where domed roofs curve like sand dunes. The mountains rise in the distance, their peaks still frosted with winter snow, even as you bake in the valley below. You know that somewhere up there, high above the dust and goats, is the secret ingredient you crave? Actual, honest-to-goodness snow? The Achaemenid Empire is in full swing.
Ow.
You're living under the rule of Cyrus the Great, or maybe Darius, depending on which century we've time-warped into. Roads are being built, Zoroastrian fire temples flicker, and rumors swirl of lavish royal feasts in Persepolis, where the wine flows and something called Faloodeh might be served. Cold now, don't get too excited. You won't be handed a bowl of chocolate swirl with rainbow sprinkles. No one's invented dairy-based gelato yet. But in place of that, there's something else brewing. A way of preserving snow. A mixture of syrup and chilled threads of starch. A cooling technique so bizarre and so ahead of its time that modern engineers still raise their eyebrows at it. Right now, as you sit in the sun, fan-optional drool, semi-voluntary, you're dreaming the same dream some long-forgotten palace chef once had. What if we could eat winter? But before you get to taste anything, there's a journey to make. A network of trade routes winds across the region, one camel step at a time. From India, sweet spices like cardamom. From the Levant, date syrup and honey. From local orchards, plums, mulberries, and fragrant roses. You pass by a merchant's stall, baskets of crushed pistachios, trays of candied orange peel, dried figs stacked like miniature towers. You catch a whiff of rose water. Sweet, floral, sticky. It's poured over everything here, from pastries to perfumes. Some guy even dabbed it behind his ears before hawking a cart of stuffed grape leaves. The truth is, people here have been obsessed with managing heat for centuries, not just with food, but with their homes, their clothes, their gardens. Shade is power. Breeze is status. Frozen things, those are borderline magical. You don't have a freezer, but you do have a clever plan. Hike that snow down from the mountain, insulate it underground, and hope it lasts through the week. Welcome to the beginning of ice storage. Asterisk, some scholars argue that this system evolved gradually, not intentionally. Others believe it was a carefully designed imperial project commanded by kings who didn't want to sweat while lounging. Either way, we're about to walk slowly, and preferably in the evening toward one of the ancient world's most unlikely innovations. And while you walk, listen. The sand crunches underfoot. Child is trying to catch a lizard with a shoe. Somewhere behind you, someone's playing a reed flute very badly. But above it all, the mountains loom, white-topped, silent, waiting. Snow, you think? Let's go get some. You've set out before dawn, which is the only reasonable time to do anything involving movement in this part of the world. The sky is still a pale indigo, just flirting with gold on the horizon, and the stars are bowing out for the day. You're not alone. You're part of a caravan more than a dozen camels, 24 men, and one brave goat that insists on tagging along for reasons unclear to everyone, including the goat. The mission? Snow. Yes, actual snow. It's the 5th century BCE, and the Achaemenid Empire is humming with order. Royal roads connect cities. Messengers run on foot like ancient Amazon Prime. And yet somehow, you've been roped into a seasonal expedition to fetch winter from the mountains and drag it down to the desert. There's no refrigeration, but the nobles still want their chilled rosewater puddings. So off you go. The camels are loaded with huge baskets woven from palm fibers, lined with wool and stuffed with straw. These baskets are meant to hold the snow, though you suspect they're just slightly fancier versions of ancient Tupperware. At the rear of the train is a sturdy little wagon. It's covered in thick cloth and packed with additional ice boxes that vaguely resemble the world's least aerodynamic wedding cakes. The mountain trail snakes upward, narrow and dust-choked. You pass through groves of almond trees, their blooms somehow still clinging despite the heat. Every so often you see a herder with a wide-brimmed hat waving lazily at the caravan as if to say, "Ah, yes, another group of madmen hunting snow." In July, as you climb, the air grows sharper. Pine replaces dust. The silence deepens. You reach elevations where breathing becomes a task and sweating is no longer optional. But eventually, a miracle appears in Alpine Pocket where snow has stubbornly survived the summer. It's not glittering powder. It's crusty, slightly gray, and looks like someone's uncle already stepped in it. But to you, it's treasure. The team gets to work immediately, scooping and packing, layering the snow with straw to insulate it. Everyone moves with urgency. Time is the enemy. If the sun catches you on the way down, all you'll be delivering is a basket of very expensive puddles. The men chatter as they work. One tells a story about a prince who demanded snow each week, threatening to behead his cook if the Faloodeh was lukewarm. Another claims that the queen once requested snow be shaped into tiny birds and painted with saffron, though everyone agrees this is probably just poetic exaggeration. Still, it's not all myth. Historians confirm that Persian elites, especially during the Achaemenid and later Sassanid periods, employed dedicated snow collectors. Some were slaves, others were skilled laborers. Either way, it was a known job, a seasonal hustle. While the Greek world was still mostly philosophizing in sandals, Persia was moving snow like it was spice. And those baskets, they weren't just tossed into cellars. They were taken to something far more clever, something chilling in more ways. Then one, the Yakhchals. You begin the descent with the first wave of snow. It's still early morning. The shadows are long, the breeze is kind, and one of the camels has decided to walk sideways for no clear reason. You're used to it by now. Partway down, you pass another team heading up. They nod at you, the tired, slushy veterans. It's a well-organized operation. Even rural areas have small personal Yakhchals for preserving dairy or drinks. But the real action happens in the larger cities. These towering dome-shaped ice houses are architectural marvels. It's designed to store snow for months, sometimes all year. As you draw closer to town, the Yakhchal appears like a sandy beehive poking above the skyline. It looks simple, even comical, like something a kid might make out of clay and then forget in the sun. But it's not simple. It's ancient air conditioning. And it works. Historians still argue whether Yakhchals were first used just for food storage, or if snow storing was always part of the plan. What's clear is this. By 400 BCE, Persians were transporting snow by camel, storing it underground and using it to make chilled deserts. They weren't just surviving the heat, they were flourishing in it. By mid-morning, you arrive at the city gates. The guards wave the snow caravan through, partly out of respect, partly out of sheer excitement. A small crowd gathers, kids squeal and chase alongside the camels, trying to peek into the baskets. One old woman claps when she sees the wagon and mutters something about saffron season. The snow is carefully unloaded. Some of it goes straight into storage. Some, though, will be used tonight for a satrap's feast, no doubt. You, unfortunately, will not be attending. You'll be sweating in your quarters, probably chasing mosquitoes with a sandal. But for now, you've done something rare. You've delivered winter to the heart of summer. You've helped preserve ice in one of the hottest places on Earth. You rest beside a shaded wall. Someone hands you a drink rosewater diluted with snow. It's sweet, cool, and fragrant. You take a sip and immediately spill some down your tunic. Classic. Still, it's worth it. In that moment, you understand why emperors demanded it, why couriers risked desert travel, and why some chef somewhere had a dream of snow you could eat. The Yakhchal stands before you now, like a sleeping giant. Its mud brick walls rise in soft spirals, tapering to a point like a beehive that someone whispered architectural secrets to. It's not just a building, it's a promise. Sun with geometry and patience. You step inside, and instantly the air changes. It's cooler, quieter. The thick, insulated walls, often up to 2 meters wide at the base, do their job well. The air smells of damp earth, aged straw, and something faintly sweet, maybe a forgotten shard of rosewater ice stuck to the stone floor. This isn't just some big fridge. The Yakhchal is a marvel of passive engineering. It's built partially underground. With a subterranean storage pit at its base, it maintains low temperatures without needing a single watt of electricity. Above ground, its high conical roof funnels warm air upward and out through a clever ventilation shaft. And if you were looking closely, you'd see Windcatchers, those tall, narrow towers that direct cool desert breezes downward, helping keep the inner chamber chilly even when the outside air could cook a goat. You pause near one of the stone steps that descends into the pit. Below, workers are shoveling snow into neat piles, layering it with straw, tamping it down. The snow may have arrived crusty and tired, but with a little care, it'll last for months. Some scholars argue that the Yakhchal design was inspired by even earlier Mesopotamian or Egyptian storage structures. Others believe the Persians were the first to fully master long-term snow preservation. There's even debate about what exactly they stored. Was it only snow? Or also ice made artificially using evaporative cooling on cold desert nights? No one can say for sure. What you do know is that it's 1,000 years before anyone in Europe will figure out similar thermal tech. One worker is humming to himself. Another is licking a frostbitten finger and pretending not to be in mild pain. You can't blame him. It's 40 degrees Celsius outside, and the inside of the Yakhchal feels like a snowman's belly button. Later. You help carry a shallow clay tray to the surface. It's filled with packed snow, mixed with a bit of syrup, some concoction of grape molasses, crushed dates, maybe even a few saffron threads. The mixture will be set in the open courtyard at night, where the dry air and low temps will freeze it solid by dawn. It's basically the original ice tray, minus the freezer, minus the tray. Okay, it's just a clever plate, but still it works. Nearby, a cook sits cross-legged, fanning a small brazier to prepare syrup. He's muttering about the perfect rosewater ratio and how last week's batch was far too floral, like licking a sandal. Make a mental note not to mention the floral. Sandal slander to the merchant who sold it. Persian cuisine has always danced with fragrance. This isn't just a sugar fest, it's a balancing act. Rose, cardamom, saffron, maybe even musk or ambergris in the really fancy batches. You suddenly realize that the line between perfume and dessert here is extremely thin. You wouldn't be surprised if someone accidentally spritzed their wrist and ate it. You sip another snow-cooled drink. It's one laced with sour cherry syrup. Flavor is sharp, almost electric, and gone too quickly. Still, it leaves a little chill on your lips, like a secret you weren't supposed to taste in the first place. By my mad afternoon, you're lying under the shade of a fig tree beside the Yakhchal. The structure looms behind you, cool and quiet, like a sleeping beast that guards its frozen treasure. In the distance, children run through the city streets, their sandals slapping the baked mud. One boy carries a lump of snow on a tray. He's treating it like a royal jewel, parading it to his grandmother, who presumably ordered it with firm authority and possibly mild threats. You overhear two older men arguing about whether snow, stored longer, tastes sweeter. One insists it's like wine, it improves with time. The other says that's nonsense, and only fresh snow makes the proper crunch when chewed. Historians still argue, too, though perhaps with fewer hand gestures. The sun begins to dip. The air cools, not cold, but merciful. And as the city prepares for evening, the Yakhchal hums on in its silent way, breathing out coolness like a desert dragon. It's funny, you think. This Madon brick dome could have passed for a grain silo or a storage hut, but instead it holds a little winter, a trick of climate architecture and ambition. The ancient Persians didn't just build empires, they built moments of relief, spoons of joy, in places like this quiet, clever, and impossibly cool. Tomorrow night, there'll be a banquet. The snow you hauled, the syrup you helped stir, the trays you helped freeze, they'll all be part of something grand. But tonight, you're just lying in the dirt, watching a goat try to eat someone's shoe. Progress, it turns out, is always a little messy. It's the next evening now, and the city is buzzing. You've wandered into the palace courtyard just in time to witness something equal parts culinary and theatrical, a royal feast under a velvet sky. Torchlight flickers across polished stone. Dancers spin slowly to the haunting tunes of an oud, and platters the size of wagon wheels pass from servant to servant, like slow-motion comets. You weren't exactly invited, but no one seems to notice as you melt into the shadows, claiming a quiet spot beneath a pomegranate tree. From here, the view is perfect, wide enough to see the nobles recline on their silk cushions, close enough to smell the spices wafting from bronze dishes shaped like leaves. A satrap, one of the king's provincial governors, sits at the center of it all. A man with a beard so sharp it could slice figs. He gestures casually, and another round of dishes is presented. Roasted quail stuffed with dates, eggplant and sour tamarind, lamb glazed with honey and coriander. But then comes the moment you've been waiting for. A procession of servants enters. With all the dramatic flair of a priestly ritual, they carry deep bowls, cold to the touch, each one lightly steaming in the warm air. It's not fire, it's condensation. The satrap smiles. Inside the bowls, Faloodeh, you watch as he dips his spoon into a shimmering nest of thin, starchy noodles, soaked in a syrup laced with lime juice and rose water. It glistens like dew. The noodles, likely made from wheat starch, have been chilled over snow-packed in clay, then swirled with syrup and dusted with crushed pistachios. It's not ice cream exactly, but it's not ice cream either. Historians still debate whether Faloodeh should be considered a sorbet or a sherbet, something entirely separate. The word itself would later morph into Faloodeh in Mughal India. But here in Persia, it remains delightfully ambiguous. Across the courtyard, someone mutters about a failed batch from last week, too chewy, not sweet enough, scandalous, not a noble. Swears his cook once added cinnamon and nearly lost his position over it. You get the sense that in this circle, dessert is a high-stakes affair. And here's the thing. This isn't just about flavor. It's about class, ingenuity, and spectacle. The chilled dessert isn't just refreshing, it's symbolic. We are so powerful, so well-organized, and so good at math that we can eat frozen noodles in the middle of the desert. One man dips his spoon in sighs. It's as if solving a philosophical riddle. Another lady breaks her chilled dessert with a quiet clink and adds a dab of quince syrup from a tiny glass vial. You've never seen such gentle intensity directed at noodles. A nearby musician takes a break and is immediately handed a small bowl. Even entertainers get a taste, though you suspect this is a bribe to ensure continued playing and no sudden musical improvisations. And let's not forget the aromas. The Faloodeh is fragrant, almost too fragrant. It smells like someone distilled an entire spring garden and added a hint of vinegar. The rose water is everywhere, seeping into your nose, clinging to your clothes, making you wonder if you've been secretly perfumed during the evening. As the meal continues, Scribe begins recording dishes on a wax tablet. This was apparently common at royal banquets to document the menu for posterity, or maybe for the next chef who needs to replicate the magic without. The fatal mistake of overdoing the lemon. You notice the serving bowls are carved with subtle geometric patterns. They're chilled in advance and kept in shaded basins filled with snow from the Yakhchal. One servant runs back and forth with a basket of fresh snow shavings, like a desert version of a gelato station. Someone nearby murmurs a story about an earlier design. King Artaxerxes, perhaps, who once demanded that no dessert ever be repeated at court. The chefs apparently got extremely creative. One created a sort of ice tapestry made from frozen syrup and edible flower petals. Another tried freezing goat's milk, which ended ... poorly. And yes, historians still argue whether any of these stories are real or courtly exaggeration. There's little direct documentation from this era about specific dessert recipes. What we do have are fragments, references, and poems, passing remarks and travelogues, and a handful of preserved kitchen tablets from later dynasties. You sit back now, letting the evening air carry you further into the scene. The satrap is full, finally. He waves his hand, and a flute player resumes, slowly spinning out a melody so soft it feels like woven air. The servants clear away the dessert bowls. What? And you watch as the last glistening threads of Faloodeh vanish into the mouths of the elite. And you think how strange, how impressive, how very Persian it is that something so ephemeral, so prone to melting, has ever taken this seriously. The stars bloom overhead now, bright and indifferent. The banquet slows. The guests laugh languidly. You consider stealing a leftover bowl, but let's be honest. You'd probably trip over your own sandals and end up face first in a flower pot. Still, the moment lingers. Chilled noodles. And the knowledge that 1,000 years ago, people were already dreaming up ways to beat the heat with flair, flavor, and just a touch of culinary drama. The feast has ended, but you're not done yet, because tonight you're trailing behind someone more interesting than any noble. The palace cook. He's grumbling to himself, barefoot, carrying an empty syrup pot and muttering something about too much lime, not enough respect. He doesn't notice you slipping along behind him as he ducks into the kitchen courtyard, a tangle of shadows. Clay ovens, stacked pots, and sleeping cats. You catch your breath in the warm, fragrant air. You watch. He kneels beside a table, low to the ground, and begins preparing for tomorrow's batch. Flour, water, and a small copper pot. He pours a thin starch solution onto a hot stone slab, then scrapes it off in threads so fine they barely look real. These are the noodles, not made for chewing, really more like texture with a hint of form. They'll be chilled overnight, then soaked in syrup. It's equal parts science and theater. You step closer and watch as he pulls out a second pot. This one's sticky with cooled syrup. Dips a finger in and tastes, then adds a pinch of ground coriander. Pauses. Adds more nods. You've just witnessed culinary inspiration happen in real time, with the exact emotional arc of someone deciding to finally spice their popcorn. What you're seeing isn't just dessert making. It's the invention of Faloodeh in its earliest form. And yes, historians still argue whether it started as a drink, a slush, or a solid. But here now, it's a bit of all three. There's no rigid category, just a delightful mess of texture. And temperature, the cook works quickly, laying out the finished noodles on a reed mat to dry. Tomorrow, he'll mix them with syrup chilled over snow and serve it in delicate bowls lined with pomegranate seeds. If someone important is in attendance, he might even add saffron, which costs more than a camel's ransom and looks like threads of fire. He glances over at you, finally noticing your presence. But instead of yelling, he grins. "Want to help?" he asks, as if inviting you to join a sacred ritual. You nod, of course. You're already elbow deep in starch within minutes. Later, as the trays are covered and stacked, he tells you a story. Long ago, a desert village had only one snowy mountain and one stubborn elder who refused to share it. But a clever girl baked snow into bread, laced it with herbs, and shared it with the entire town. The elder relented. The mountain became public, and the girl became the first dessert master. Is it true? Probably not. No, but that doesn't matter. You sit back, fingers sticky, stomach rumbling. A nearby brazier simmers with date syrup. Somewhere above, a bird calls once, then goes silent. The cook leans against a clay wall and fans himself with a piece of palm leaf. In this land, he says softly, you either learn how to cool things, or you die sweaty. The kitchen courtyard is a different kind of palace. There's no marble here, no jewels, just soot, steam, and the quiet confidence of people who know what they're doing with sugar and snow and those noodles. They're not just food, they're part of a long, strange evolution of frozen sweets that will ripple through centuries. Eventually, Faloodeh will hop eastward to India, westward to Arabia, and even nudge into early European kitchens. But now, it's just you, a cook with a flair for lime juice, and a half-dozen trays of what might be the world's first proto-sorbet. There's one more curious moment before the night ends. A young apprentice, barely 12, rushes in, carrying a small vial. Chef, someone brought more sandalwood extract. The cook rolls his eyes. We're making dessert, not flooring. But still, he opens the vial and lets a single drop fall into the syrup. He stirs, tastes, considers, and then ... smiles. You get to try it. The flavor is faint, woodsy, warm, oddly calming. It doesn't scream dessert. It murmurs it. And suddenly, you understand something. Ancient Persian deserts aren't about sugar highs or creamy excess. They're about contrast. Cold and fragrant, sweet and sour, texture and temperature. Everything designed not to overwhelm, but too cool to restore, to quiet the body after a long, blistering day. You sit back, eyes half closed, already picturing tomorrow's bowl of chilled Faloodeh, with noodles like silk threads and syrup that tastes like moonlight. The cook claps, the flour from his hands. Get some sleep, he says. Tomorrow, we freeze time again. And so you do. It's just before dawn now, and you're already awake, not out of duty or even excitement. Really, but because the entire town is stirring with the quiet mischief of a summer festival day. This isn't a religious holiday. It's not even officially sanctioned by the king, but ask anyone in the market and they'll tell you. When the first batch of snow-frozen desserts is ready, people celebrate. You tie your sash, step into your sandals, and drift out into a waking city that smells like bread ovens, jasmine flowers, and melted syrup. Down by the central square, there's music. Not the grand, courtly kind, but the sort played on goat-hide drums and single-string fiddles, with rhythms that suggest someone somewhere has already had too much fermented date juice. Today, snow is currency, and you see it being passed around. With theatrical flair, small scoops of shaved ice balanced on flat stones. Threads of chilled Faloodeh slurped straight from bowls clutched in sweaty palms. Street vendors shouting above each other with promises of extra saffron or rosewater from real roses. And in the chaos, you learn about the less official side of Persia's frozen empire. Snow smugglers. They move at night mostly. Boys on sleds, donkeys loaded with frost-covered crates, narrow alleys lit by moonlight and tiny oil lamps. Their goal? To bring snow from the Yakhchals to those without, especially the small tea houses and homes beyond the inner city walls. Is some even dare to sneak snow from royal reserves. One kid brags he once shaved ice straight off a satrap's private stash and sold it by the spoonful near the docks. You wonder how much of that is true. But then again, the crowd is now gathering too. Watch an unofficial snow race. Young men sprint through the square with trays of Faloodeh, trying to reach the finish line without spilling a drop. The winner earns a silk sash and free sweets for the rest of the day. The loser, quite possibly, earns a bruised ego and a nose. Full of lime slush, you wander through the festivities, stopping at one stall where a woman hands you a small bowl chilled over packed straw. It holds Faloodeh, yes, but also thin slices of apricot, sugared rose petals, and just the tiniest sprinkle of salt. You hesitate, but only for a second. The taste? Sweet, fragrant, and oddly refreshing. The salt jolts your taste buds awake like a slap from a floral ghost. As you eat, a group of elders sits beneath a canopy, recounting how this very festival started. The story goes, centuries ago, in a year of extreme heat and no snow, a resourceful woman built a makeshift cooling pit by lining a dry well with clay and filling it with cloth soaked in vinegar water. She hung her syrup-dipped noodles over it, praying for the desert breeze to do the rest. According to the legend, she not only invented a new method of cooling, but also married the city's chief cook after beating him in a dessert contest. Historians still argue. One elder laughs, whether she actually existed, but that hasn't stopped us from naming this festival after her. You nod politely, mouth full of rose noodles, unsure if you've just learned a great truth or a complete fabrication. Either way, it's a good story, and somehow that seems more important right now. As midday approaches, the snow runs low. Some vendors pack up early, while others get creative selling lukewarm Faloodeh with cold syrups poured on top and pretending it's a feature, not a flaw. You're impressed. It's the ancient equivalent of artisan room temp sorbet. Children run through the square with melted bowls, still sticky-faced and proud. One has a tiny snowball cupped like a bird's egg. He offers it to you with a solemn expression and whispers magic. You don't eat it, but you nod, because he's not wrong. Magic isn't always fireworks and thunderbolts. Sometimes it's snow in the desert. Sometimes it's sweet noodles on a hot morning. And sometimes it's a city that stops everything, even trade, even chores, just to taste something cold together. As the sun climbs higher, you retreat toward the quieter streets. People nap under awnings. A Faloodeh bowl sits forgotten on a windowsill, its syrup slowly crystallizing in the heat, and you're already wondering what the festival will look like next year? Will someone invent a new flavor? Will there be another snow thief legend? Will that one goat finally win the snow race by sheer persistence? Who knows? But one thing is certain, Persians don't just make dessert. They celebrate it loudly, proudly, and with just the right amount of floral flair. You're back in the bazaar now, the day's heat beginning to settle like a damp wool blanket over your shoulders. The Faloodeh festival has wound down, but the scent of syrup and roasted nuts still clings to the air, weaving through the alleyways. Like gossip, this part of the city isn't about snow or spectacle. It's about ingredients, raw, fragrant, sometimes suspiciously shaped, but all essential to the desserts that have taken over your life. You stroll past stalls, stacked high with dates, bundles of dried limes, and jars of things that probably started as flowers and ended up as something between perfume and potion. Your senses are immediately overwhelmed. Rosewater, jasmine essence, cardamom so strong it nearly makes you sneeze. You pass a woman grinding saffron with a mortar and pestle so reverently, you're almost afraid to interrupt. She glances up and says, "For kings, for lovers, for ice." You nod and back away, slowly, feeling like you've just witnessed a spice blessing, Persian cuisine especially. Dessert is as much about smell as it is about taste. Maybe more. You walk by racks of musk pods, sprigs of dried basil, and sandalwood slivers meant to flavor everything from custards to water jugs. These aren't garnishes, they're the soul of the dish. You remember the cook's sandalwood syrup? And realize that, yes, here in ancient Persia, it's entirely reasonable to flavor food like a forest. One vendor gestures to you with a crooked finger. His table is covered in little wax-sealed vials. "Smell this," he commands, unstoppering. 1. You lean in cautiously. The scent that hits you is confusing, sweet, earthy, warm. "Ambergris," he says, beaming. "From the sea, like perfume, but edible." You blink. You're pretty sure that's whale vomit. He nods again. Very rare. It's very expensive. We mix it with saffron for cold milk drinks. It's very good for digestion or poetry. Historians still debate whether ambergris was truly common in ancient Persian cooking, or if it became more prominent in later Islamic medicine and elite cuisines. Either way, here in the bazaar, it's apparently the caviar of the spice world. You duck into a shaded side alley where the scent of citrus mingles with wood smoke. A small boy is zesting bitter orange peel over a bowl of yogurt, humming too. Himself, his grandmother stirs a pot beside him, something dark, sticky, and violently fragrant. She looks up and tells you it's rose jam for cooling the heart. You don't question it. There's something poetic about how every ingredient here seems to carry a purpose beyond taste. Saffron isn't just a spice, it's warming, mood-lifting, medicinal. Rose water isn't just fragrant, it soothes the mind. Even Faloodeh, people say, is good for calming nerves and cooling the body in summer. And isn't that what dessert is supposed to do? Not just please the tongue, but restore you? You reach a stall that looks like it sells only dried petals, crimson, ivory, purple, gold. They rustle in the breeze, a garden in stasis. A young woman scoops a handful and drops them into a jar of syrup behind her. She tells you she's making galab, a concentrated rose syrup used to flavor chilled milk, sorbet, and even certain fish dishes. You try to smile as if fish sorbet. It doesn't sound mildly distressing. You're handed a sample in a little clay cup. Syrup is cold, almost icy, and thick enough to coat your tongue with a bloom of floral sweetness. It tastes like someone melted springtime and let it hug your mouth. You sip slowly and sit beneath an awning with strips of dyed linen fluttering above. Nearby, a bearded man plays a slow tune on a reed flute, his fingers tapping out the notes. With dreamy laziness, even the music here feels like syrup. You reflect for a moment on what you've seen. Frozen noodles, chilled syrup, snow hauled down from mountains, perfume you can eat. It's not just dessert, it's a philosophy, a way of saying, we don't need to escape the heat, we can transform it. Persian cooks, you now realize, weren't merely experimenting. They were composing. Smell, temperature, color, texture. Everything chosen like a line of poetry. And even though recipes might have been passed down by word of mouth or scribbled in margins of poetry scrolls, the results are anything but accidental. One final vendor calls to you as you prepare to leave the bazaar. He's offering samples of cold syrups, some for drinks, others for desserts. One is made with violets, another with quince, and one, bizarrely, with cucumber and spearmint. You tried the last one, expecting to regret it. Instead, you're transported. It's light, crisp, cold, like standing next to a waterfall with a mint leaf in your mouth. You blink. The vendor winks. It's for heat stroke or romance. Depending on the hour, you walk away laughing softly. Because really, what else can you do when someone casually offers you romance in a glass? The sun is dipping now. The bazaar closes like a flower at dusk. Curtains are drawn, lanterns lit. You walk home carrying a small pouch of dried lime, sticky vial of rose syrup, and a whole new respect for just how deeply flavor can shape culture. Snow might have been the showstopper, but fragrance? That's the soul of it all. You're on the road again, feet dusty and robe trailing behind you, tracing the path of ancient recipes, ones that began with Persian snow, saffron, and silk-threaded syrups, and somehow ended up reinvented beneath distant domes and mango trees. Today, you're heading east. Across arid plains, over foothills lined with tea shrubs and monsoon-drenched valleys, toward the palaces of the Mughal Empire. Because like all good stories, the tale of Persian frozen deserts didn't stay put. Traveled the Mughals' descendants, of Central Asian conquerors who swept into India, were known for two things: their architectural flair and their obsession with food. You've probably heard of the Taj Mahal white marble, moonlight, all that. But here's what they don't tell you. Its kitchens were just as elaborate as its gardens. You arrive in Agra, centuries before tourism, and immediately smell cardamom and mango on the breeze. A Mughal cook is fanning a copper pot with all the drama of a stage actor, while another carefully arranges slivers of pistachio on something creamy, round, and suspiciously cold. You found it, kulfi. Kulfi isn't quite Faloodeh. It's thicker, denser, and unapologetically creamy. No noodles here. Just milk, reduced slowly over fire until it becomes rich enough to coat your throat and quiet your brain. Add saffron, sugar, ground almonds, and most importantly, ice. Or more precisely, a mix of ice and salt used to freeze the metal molds holding the sweet mixture. You're handed one on a stick. It's frozen solid, dusted in crushed rose petals, and starts melting the moment your fingers brush it. You take a bite and feel that same ancient Persian logic at work. Cool the body, delight the tongue, scent the air while you're at it. Historians still debate whether kulfi directly descended from Persian desserts like Faloodeh or developed independently from Central Asian milk traditions. But as you sit in the palace gardens, listening to peacocks scream and the tinkle of silver bowls, the connections feel too strong to ignore. The Mughal emperors, especially Akbar and Shah Jahan, were mad for luxury, and dessert was no exception. There are stories of entire caravans transporting ice from the Himalayas to chill their fruit bowls, of chefs competing to create the coldest, rarest, most aromatic dishes imaginable, of mango sorbets churned with sandalwood paddles, one particularly. Theatrical recipe calls for kulfi to be molded into the shape of a lotus flower and served atop a floating ice boat during moonlit banquets. You're not sure how much of that is embellishment, but it's easy to imagine when you're watching a kitchen hand carve delicate petals out of frozen dairy. What's remarkable is how these recipes adapted. Persian Faloodeh used noodles and floral syrups. Indian kulfi swapped that out for milk, tropical fruit, and nuts, but kept the ritual of ice and scent. In both, there's a reverence for the process, kind of edible architecture. A servant offers you a small bowl, something experimental. Apparently, it's kulfi flavored with kura, an extract from screwpine flowers. It tastes like if vanilla had a twin who ran away to live in a perfume bottle. You're unsure for half a second, then it hits you. This is brilliantly weird. Later, you sit with a Mughal physician who tells you kulfi is good for digestion and balancing bile, whatever that means. He advises not to eat it on an empty stomach, but immediately gives you a second helping. Contradiction, it seems. It's part of the medical method. You notice that even the serving vessels, silver cups, stone molds, porcelain dishes, are chosen not just for elegance, but to hold the cold. Some are chilled in advance. Others are double layered, with ice packed into the outer shell. You're struck again by how much work goes into a fleeting sensation. One moment of cold on the tongue, hours of preparation. It's almost poetic, like chasing snowflakes in summer. A nearby poet agrees. He tells you that the emperor once rewarded a cook with a ring of emeralds for presenting him with kulfi shaped, like a falcon in flight. Single bite, he says, and the emperor wept. You're skeptical, but you want to believe. Because here, ice cream isn't just a dessert. It's a message, way to show wealth, care, artistry. Brought you snow in a bowl flavored with flowers. In the heat of an Indian afternoon. You leave the palace that night under a star-punched sky, slightly sticky with syrup, pocket-heavy with a fig you stole from the garden. You think about how recipes travel faster than kings, how snow that once cooled Persian nobles now chills. Milk in Mughal kitchens. And how every frozen bite, whether spiced with saffron or mango, carries a little whisper from the mountains. You arrive back in Persia, just in time for some international gossip Greek-style. It's the 5th century BCE, and Persian nobles are entertaining guests from across the Aegean. These men are wide-eyed, sunburnt, and more than a little confused. By the customs around them, you can't really blame them. After all, the idea of eating snow on purpose, mixed with violet syrup and chilled in clay pots buried in the sand, wasn't exactly common on the rocky hills of Athens you settle into. A shaded veranda, eavesdropping without shame. A silver tray circles with tiny bowls of something cold, sticky, and vaguely floral. One of the Greeks hesitates. Is this medicine? He asks. The Persian host chuckles, dabs his beard with a linen cloth soaked in rose water, and replies, "It's dessert. Try not to overthink it." The Greeks do, of course. Overthink it. That's their whole brand. You listen as they whisper to each other about the extravagance of chilled food. One wonders aloud how much snow it takes to keep a palace cold. Another asks whether the cold desserts are some kind of sorcery. And then there's one guy, there's always one who's convinced the Persians are hiding magical snow. Fields underground, the truth isn't so mystical. But to them, Persia might as well be a land of edible spells. Historians still argue whether early Greek accounts of Persian snow drinks were exaggerated impressions or faithful descriptions of what we'd now call primitive sorbet. Some scholars point to mentions in Xenophon's writings where chilled drinks and icy confections are briefly noted but not in detail. Others say the Greeks were simply too weirded out by the idea to write it down accurately. You get the sense. Sitting here with both parties, that nobody's being entirely honest. The Persians, proud and playful, aren't correcting any misconceptions. If the Greeks want to believe the snow is enchanted, well, let them. Your host leans toward the foreign guests and tells them about a special treat. Served only during the solstice snow, packed into a bowl of sweetened pomegranate molasses, topped with shaved almonds and orange blossom. One Greek mutters, "That sounds like a love potion." The host smiles mysteriously, "Only if you share it." Meanwhile, the Greeks try to explain their version of dessert, mostly honey cakes, baked goods, and lots of wine. They seem baffled by the lack of yeast in Persian confections, and even more perplexed by how cold can be part of a flavor profile. "Where's the fire?" one asks. The Persian cook shrugs, "Prefer snow." One enthusiastic Greek takes notes, sketching something that might be a Yakhchal, or might just be a very angry-looking beehive. He's trying, at least, eventually. The conversation shifts to military strategy and trade routes, but you stay focused on the food, because buried beneath the cross-cultural confusion is a fascinating truth. Persia was one of the earliest civilizations to turn cold into a culinary art, and that fact left an impression. In time, as the Greeks expanded their empire under Alexander the Great, more of these icy traditions trickled westward. Imagine some long-suffering Greek merchant trying to explain Faloodeh to a skeptical Athenian baker. "It's like noodles, but cold." "No, it's sweet, yes, with flowers." "No, not." "Pasta? Look, just try it." One tiny but quirky historical thread suggests that Greek physicians may have picked up on Persian cooling techniques as part of their humoral theories: cold foods to balance hot temperaments, snow to treat fevers, rose water to soothe anxiety. That's right, even Hippocrates may have been prescribing what was essentially ancient ice cream. You sit and sip a cold melon drink, wondering how much cultural exchange happens over desserts. A lot, you suspect. More than over swords or scrolls. Because it's hard to argue with a good spoonful of something that makes your tongue tingle and your scalp cool. The sun dips lower, casting long golden shadows over the polished tiles. Persian host offers one last round of chilled saffron milk in alabaster cups. The Greek ambassador, still suspicious, raises an eyebrow and asks if it's been tampered with. The host smiles and raises his own cup. "Yes," he says. "It's been tampered with." Joy. You lean back against a pillar, legs stretched out, stomach blissfully full of spice and chill, and you think, maybe the best diplomacy is served semi-frozen, lightly perfumed, and in small, deliberate spoonfuls. The Greeks may not take the recipes home tonight, but the memory, that will linger. Long after the snow has melted, you sit with your back to a clay wall, sipping something cold enough to fog your teeth. And finally ask the question that's been following you like a suspicious camel. Was this really ice cream? Because sure, you've seen snow packed into rose water, chilled noodles and syrup, and thickened milk frozen into golden molds. But none of it looks quite like the stuff that comes in modern waffle cones. So what exactly is ice cream anyway? And here's where things get a little slippery, pun intended. Historians still debate whether ancient Persian Faloodeh or Mughal kulfi count as true ice cream. The argument, as fussy as a royal banquet seating chart, hinges on definitions. Does it need to include churned cream, a custard base, air, Or is it simply any frozen dessert involving sweetness and sensory delight? You lean forward as a dusty scholar in a green robe unfolds a scroll, clears his throat and begins explaining that technically, ice cream requires a fat emulsion structure, with uniformly distributed ice crystals and overrun. You blink slowly. You pretend to care. You focus instead on the cold almond saffron paste melting into your tongue. To the Persians, none of this mattered. They didn't know the word emulsion, but they knew what felt luxurious. The point wasn't dairy chemistry, it was sensation. A bowl of Faloodeh was a miracle because it brought snow into summer, sweetness into sweat, and a sense of relief into a world without refrigeration. Still, let's be fair to the technical crowd. Modern ice cream is usually churned. The constant stirring as it freezes prevents large ice crystals from forming, resulting in that smooth, cloud-like texture you expect. The ancient Persian methods, by contrast, relied on still freezing using salt and snow around a container or pre-cooled pits to slowly freeze the desert without movement. That means denser textures, and sometimes icier ones. Kulfi, for instance, isn't whipped. It's boiled down milk, frozen solid, and served like an edible stalactite. Faloodeh is made with rice starch noodles that are barely frozen and mixed. With syrup, neither has the fluff of today's ice cream, but both deliver the same basic magic trick. Cold plus sweet equals happiness. You wander through a mental marketplace of frozen desserts across the world: Italian granita, Japanese kakigori, Filipino halo, even modern sorbet. None of these have dairy, and yet nobody dares to say they aren't real. So why hold ancient Persian treats to a different standard? Passing vendor interrupts your reverie by shouting, "Try the snowment. It's cool enough to shut up your uncle." Irresistible. You trade a coin for a bowl. It's rougher than gelato and sweeter than it needs to be. But it works. Your teeth complain, your eyes water slightly, and your whole body sighs in relief. This, whatever it's called, is clearly dessert. You lean against a stall and listen to two merchants arguing over where the best ice comes from. One swears by Elbor's mountain snow, while the other insists on imports from the Hindu Kush. They nearly come to blows over crushed pistachios. You smile. This is the kind of fight you want to be near. One even claims his grandfather made a Faloodeh so good that King Darius ate it twice, once chilled, and once when it had fully melted and turned into a drink. Apparently he liked it better melted, more complex, the merchant whispers. There's something poetic about a dessert that can double as a beverage. You find a shady spot beside a water, its channel, and consider the philosophy behind it all. What makes something ice cream might not be about ingredients or churn rates. It might be about intent. Was it made to cool the body? To provide joy in a hostile climate? To turn food into memory? By that measure, ancient Persian frozen treats absolutely qualify. And yet labels can be persistent. When European travelers finally encountered things like kelfi or Faloodeh, they often described them with a mix of awe and condescension. Chilled potions, one called them. Perfumed ice, said another. Very few recognized them as predecessors to their own sweet traditions. In fact, many early ice cream recipes in France and Italy during the Renaissance mirrored what the Persians had done centuries earlier. Snow or ice packed around a vessel of sweetened cream flavored with orange, blossom, jasmine, or spices. Coincidence? Maybe, or maybe it's just that cool ideas tend to melt into history unnoticed. By now, your bowl is empty, and your thoughts pleasantly sluggish. You imagine sitting down at a modern ice cream parlor and ordering a Faloodeh float or a Yakhchal sundae. You imagine explaining to the teenager behind the counter that your dessert was inspired by a 2,500-year-old method involving snow caravans and underground domes. He would nod politely and probably still ask if you want sprinkles, but that's okay. Because even if Faloodeh doesn't show up in most ice cream histories, it lives on. In the rhythm of ice being pounded in the bazaar, in the scent of rosewater poured over cracked ice, in the first freezing shock of sweet relief on your tongue, whatever, the scholars decide to call it, you know what it is? It's joy. It's snow. It's a moment that melts. You've had your fill of debates for now, so you retreat to the quietest place in the city, the shaded inner garden of a noblewoman's summer pavilion. It's late afternoon, and the garden breathes. Water trickles through narrow channels carved in geometric patterns. Cypress trees throw long shadows over polished stone. You're not quite alone here, though this is a space of secrets and rituals, a world that moves a little slower, smells a little sweeter, and, oddly enough, stays significantly cooler. Inside a tiled courtyard, women in linen robes lounge on cushions, gossiping in low voices, while attendants bring cold cloths steeped in lavender and rose. A shallow bowl of snow sits melting slowly on a lacquered tray, releasing faint threads of mint into the heat. You sit cross-legged on the cool floor, quietly observe. This isn't a place for politics or scholars. It's the domain of summer. Survival, and unexpectedly, of culinary innovation. You spot something familiar. Long, thin noodles, almost translucent, swimming in a bowl of cold syrup. Faloodeh again. Except this time, it's been infused with sour cherry and scattered with shaved almonds. A young girl fans herself lazily. And you overhear her ask her aunt, "Why do the noodles taste like perfume?" The aunt laughs and says, "Because anything else would taste like the sun." You chuckle. And the sound is soft enough not to offend the stillness here. Attendants bring out woven baskets of damp cloths, some with crushed ice tucked inside, others gently soaked in sandalwood-scented water. They're draped over necks, foreheads, wrists. One woman swears it keeps her from fainting. Another insists it prevents wrinkles. You're not sure either is wrong. Historians still argue whether the women of these Persian households invented certain Faloodeh variations themselves, or if they simply perfected them in private. While royal kitchens often recorded recipes in official ledgers, the garden pavilions ran on oral tradition, quiet skill, and intuition. It's here, not in the royal court, where experimentation thrived. Sweet lemon juice mixed with snow, crushed pistachios soaked in chilled honey, even sorbets made from wild quince or pomegranate. Frozen inside clay pots sunk into the garden floor. In the distance, someone plays a saunter, a soft, shimmering melody drifting across the breeze. You sip a concoction of iced cucumber water and fennel seeds. It might be the single most refreshing thing you've ever had. One noblewoman, clearly the unofficial queen of this courtyard, shares a whispered story about her grandmother hiding snow inside bundles of silk and burying them beneath a plum tree, then using them weeks later to serve a chilled plum syrup at a wedding. They thought it was sorcery, she says, eyes gleaming. You believe it? Another woman describes how, when her husband was away on campaign, she bribed a servant to bring her snow just so she could surprise her daughter with chilled sweet cream. We didn't have saffron, she sighs. We used dried orange peel and hope. The stories tumble out like melting ice, slow, delicate, a little wistful. You can tell these aren't just desserts. They're time capsules. Each one tied to a specific summer, a secret crush, a lost garden. A favorite dish shared at the right moment with the right person. A servant walks through the courtyard gently swinging a fan soaked in rosewater, its mist leaving behind the faintest chill. The sun is lower now. Shadows stretch like long arms reaching for shade. You think about how many innovations in history happen not in laboratories, but in places like this. Pavilions, kitchens, courtyards run by women who were told they didn't shape the world yet clearly did. One chilled dessert at a time, and maybe that's the lesson. Ice cream doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it slips in quietly, nestled in a bowl held by a tired hand. Cooling a fevered brow, or helping someone get through the hottest part of the year, you stretch out beside a tiled fountain, arms behind your head, and feel the coolness. Rising from the stone, somewhere above you, birds flit through the cypress canopy. Someone laughs softly, then sighs. No debates here, no definitions, just a timeless desire for relief. A shared love of anything cold enough to make the heat bearable, and a kind of whispered defiance against the sun, against the rules, against the idea that desert is ever just desert. You close your eyes and let the scent of basil and lemon drift over you. Somewhere nearby, another bowl of Faloodeh clinks gently on a silver tray. You don't need to ask what's in it. You already know.